Hey, this is Brian again, and I'd like to ask you to do a favor. We can't do this work without people like you, so if you can, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends about Bring Back the Porch. Something's different. Like, what the? You're on the wrong side of the table. I'm supposed to be over there, but then...
Not today.
Not today. Kind of a Sadie Hawkins feel to this. And if you remember, Sadie Hawkins dances used to be where the girls asked the guys. They changed rules. So for this episode of Bring Back the Porch, Mayor Linnsie Clark is going to be asking the questions, and I am on the hot seat, so to speak. This episode of Bring Back the Porch brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. Let's get you home.
Welcome to Bring Back the Porch. So, was the funding model for media different when you started out, or was it the same but just to a lesser extent?
Well, when I came to Medicine Hat to work at Chat in 1978, one radio station. That was it. Right. There was a second radio station that had been applied for and turned down, but everybody knew that there was going to be another coming. And in 1982, when CJCY 1390 went on the air, I was the original sports director. And now the advertising pie, instead of being just divided between the Medicine Hat News and Chat, now there's the third party in there. And over the next number of years, satellite television, pay television, all the other, the media, the pie didn't get any bigger than that. It just got sliced smaller and smaller and smaller to the point where, it just wasn't economically viable for a lot of entities to exist anymore.
Well, that's an interesting point, and with online advertising as well, it's a very thin slices of pie, to the point where we actually lost our television broadcast, news broadcast.
Moment silence.
Yeah, very recently, and huge loss for the city and that continuity of storytelling for our city. When we talk about storytelling, that's you talk about you don't want to be the news, but storytelling is also such an important part of your job. So kind of transferring or drawing out a story, a narrative from a person. And you mentioned you had some creative writing skills.
Yes, I wrote a play when I was in grade 6. Yes, it was an old TV show called The Time Tunnel. I don't know if you remember it, but the premise was that the U.S. government had a secret operation where they had developed a way to travel in time so they could, alter time to their benefit.
Right.
And there was these two characters, Tony and Doug, I think were their names, and they went back in time. And the first place they landed was on the Titanic. And they're there like 2 days before it hits the iceberg, and the ethical concerns. Well, do we tell them? It was very well done, and I like that idea. And then of course Star Trek came along with different possibilities for stories. So I wrote an episode of The Time Tunnel where I went back in time and I met Private John Kennedy.
Okay.
To warn him not to go to Dallas in 1963. But I had that in my drawer for years and years and years, but I think in one of my movies it finally got.
Aww.
Yeah, I don't remember how it turned out, how I wrapped it up, but we actually put the play on in our grade 6 class at Fleetwood School in Lethbridge.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you do have to use some of those skills in broadcast. How do you balance truth and narrative? Do you know what I mean? Like, so you need a story. You need to tell a narrative, a story. But sometimes the truth is boring.
Oh, the old expression, never let the facts get in the way of a good story.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. I guess the way I've always approached it is the best way to tell a story is how would you tell this to your neighbor over the back fence?
Right.
Yeah, that was another one of the things that was brought to me by an instructor that we had at Fanshawe College. His name was J. Paul Huddleston. J. Paul had the goatee. He was an American. He had been the news director at KHJ Los Angeles for about 8 years. So he was a showman, but he always made sure that there was substance and meat in your stories. And actually, I worked for J. Paul in Calgary for a couple of years too. But that was his thing. He said, "How would you tell this story to your neighbor over the back fence?" And you have to simplify it and try to get rid of all the bureaucratic language and all the other stuff that comes in, and just boil it down to, as Paul Harvey used to say, just shuck the cob right down to the kernel. Try to keep it as simple as you can.
So in a sense, you're a bit of an interpreter as well.
Mm-hmm. Without pushing the person one way or the other. Yeah.
So in this current media state that we're in, what do you see as ways to kind of improve our ability to distinguish news, just the facts, ma'am, kind of news, from things that look a lot like news, but maybe are more opinion-based or less fact-based anyway?
I don't know if I have the answer to that.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
I think if I did, I'd probably be a lot richer.
Well, supply and demand, right? Have you seen over time a greater thirst for salacious material? Going back to John Kennedy, JFK, or some of the other presidents or people of that time, there were scandals, certainly, but they were, Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, you read the history, and, there were people who knew that John Kennedy wasn't as virtuous as perhaps they painted him. But there was this old boys club at the time where they just didn't talk about things like that. Never mind, it doesn't matter. Forward to today where, any little rumor, innuendo, it's on your phone within seconds.
Yeah.
And it's just, that's why I say you don't know what to believe anymore, because there's just so much stuff coming at you, and it's just, wow, what was that? Oh, no, what did he say?
Yeah.
And the one thing that really concerns me is the fact that I understand that SAIT used to have a broadcast journalism course, and this is a couple of years ago now. They had 24 seats, and they had 6 students. Nobody wants to get into this business anymore. They want to go into the glitz and glamour, and they're attracted by the stardom, I guess.
Right.
And journalism is being down in the mud, doing the day-to-day work, building relationships with people so they trust you. And if then there's something that they think the public needs to know, they'll call you. And it's not like, okay, now why is this person leaking this to me? There's already the walls go up today. But there was a day when people used to deliberately leak information. Governments, running up the flag, see what somebody says. We'll disavow any knowledge of it, but maybe if it sounds like the public is in favor of it, then, it's good.
Yeah.
Media has been used a lot over the years.
In many different ways, I'm sure. So part of the way that you approach the news displays that you really respect the media's role in maintaining democracy.
Oh, naturally, absolutely, because if we're not there to tell people what's happening, and sometimes you almost want to reach through that TV screen or the radio and grab them by the lapels and say, shake them. This is important. You need to pay attention. Yeah. You need to know about this.
Yes. And that balance between what do people need to know? So when you're getting tips or you're getting leaks, what analysis, when you're asking yourself, is this news?
Yeah. Why are you telling me this?
Yeah.
What's your
how did
motive?
you go about that? What was your process for kind of sussing out what the news was?
Just ask a lot of questions.
Yeah.
Ask a question. And as somebody once told me, do you know how you control an interview?
No.
You ask a question. Do you know how you keep control of the interview?
Ask another question?
Ask another question. Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, so you try to find out where, the truth is, because sometimes it's obscured and it's hidden, and you talk to more than one person and get various sides.
Yeah.
And, some issues are not always just black and white. There's a lot of gray in there.
Yes.
And, then there's things like, oh, well, I didn't know that. If I had known that, that would have been germane to the discussion. Or, this was what people were saying, but the truth is, we fact check everything now, and to make sure that it actually is truthful, not just somebody's speculation or attempt to ripple the water.
Yeah, and like you said before, it comes down so much to that trust in our institutions of government, but also trust in media.
Yep.
So it's a huge responsibility for media not to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Government makes mistakes. We all make mistakes. Yep. But there is a process in media that if you make a mistake, you print a correction.
Yep.
So that how do you apply that to other institutions? The idea that you take responsibility for mistakes, and how important is that, do you think, for that trust building?
I think the word is integrity.
Right.
Yeah. And you can sell a lot of things, but you can't sell out your integrity, because without that you are nothing.
Right.
And so you protect your reputation by telling the truth and being honest and have nothing to hide. And then I think people will give you their trust.
Yeah.
But you have to earn it.
Yeah.
It's not a given. Not just because I'm in front of a TV camera, I'm an influencer now.
Yes.
No.
Well, you are a bit of an influencer. You have your own podcast.
Yes.
How do you see the role of podcasts in our media landscape?
I think we feed a niche for people to have a place where they can be comfortable to come in and talk about the issues. And it's not going to be, what did you do that for? What were you thinking? There's no accusatory, no anger. There are ways you can ask a question and get the same answer without being in your face with the fist closed. And that's what we hope we have built here. Yeah,
and it's a longer form type
of
interview, which allows for that nuance.
And we don't edit it.
Yeah. Oh, you don't ever edit it?
No.
Oh.
Every little cough, every little hiccup, that burp I had about 15 minutes ago.
That's in stone.
Real people. Yeah.
I also think there's, an opportunity with podcasts to, it's more like radio. You can do it listen to it passively.
You can listen to it whenever, wherever, however.
Yeah, and the advertising format for podcasts is a little different than broadcast media. Can you explain how that works a little differently?
I'm still trying to figure that one out myself, but in a radio day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., there are program elements, there's music, and then there are stop sets that they call them. And at 20 after 6, you might hear 3 or 4 advertisements. And then they'll play more music. There might be a newscast at the bottom of the hour that is brought to you by Joe's Pool Hall. Mm-hmm. And then that goes on. If you're not listening to the radio at that time,
you miss it.
You miss it. With us, we can put an ad in at the top of a show, as we do. That this podcast is brought to you by Bernie Leahy, River Street Realty. We can do that for anybody. And then they can whenever anybody watches that will always be there.
Right.
We can put them in the middle of the broadcast, more than one. We can put them at the end. We can put sponsor logos up. There are more opportunities, more vehicles for us, I think, than there are in the other media.
That's interesting, and you can be very specific about it. However, I was having a conversation with an another lady who has history in journalism, and she reminded me of the importance of radio in emergencies.
Oh, first,
And
yes.
So can you, other than just the loss of the media aspect of radio, can you tell us what other purposes radio serves that maybe the average person doesn't normally think about?
Well, as you mentioned, it is the first place where people go when there's an emergency. And sadly, when there's nobody there to tell you what the emergency is, that concerns me because so much of the programming on radio stations everywhere now is pre-recorded. So the opportunity to run in, unless somebody actually knows to run in and okay, which button do I, they have to be trained to know how to interrupt that program with whatever information they have. And I'm not sure that there are emergency plans in place. We used to have them back in the day, and the radio station used to be operated 24 hours a day. And I think the only time they weren't was maybe on Sunday night from midnight to 6 a.m. because the engineers would have time to take things down if they had to do some work and whatever. But there was always somebody there to answer the phone,
right,
to talk. The police knew that if there was a problem, they could get the person on the air to say, tell people to stay away from this area. Like it was immediate.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, in 2017, when we were having the problems with the wildfires in that October year, not only out in Cypress County, but here in Medicine Hat, one of the people in the city's communications department called me because we were working late. And she says, I'm going to give this to you before I even put it on social media because I know you've got the reach. And we got that story out. It was an emergency on the Southwest Hill. Power was out and there was power lines dangling and the trees were starting to catch fire. And we could hear the concern among the fire dispatchers, like, you might have to evacuate this whole block. Like you could feel
the urgency.
They were worried, and we were able to tell people that this is what's going on. People didn't have to make up their own stories or listen to rumor. They could get it right there, right now. And I think that's been lost.
Yeah, well, sometimes you don't find out what you've lost until...
You don't know what you got till it's gone.
Yeah, and a crisis happens and, wait a minute, where's the radio?
Yeah. You leaned on it for so many years. You took it for granted. And
yeah. So I want to ask you about another fire.
Another fire? I didn't start any of them.
Well, I know. And probably you weren't even alive when the city of Medicine Hat experienced a devastating fire. Mm-hmm. When was that? And like, how did that shape our city?
I think you're referring to, I think it was like 1897.
Yeah.
They were worried more back then about prairie fires, naturally, because there was nothing to stop it if a prairie fire got going. Yeah. There was nothing in the way. Where are you going to get the water? There was a fire. It took out several buildings, I believe, in the business district, which at that time would have been along the rail lines. And the people in the city, business and merchants, said, we need protection. This was still just a town. It wasn't even a city then. So that was when they started to think about the idea of fire protection. They started to, put some pieces together, and they used to, there used to be a building where City Hall is now, not quite, but where the end of Finley Bridge is. It was a little white building that served as sort of a town office, and they kept their fire equipment in the back. They had volunteer firefighters who would come when they heard the bell, and that was the start of our fire service. And it grew slowly, and there was, as I recall reading some of the old news articles, that there was a fire district, and if you lived outside of that district, you were out of luck,
right,
because you didn't contribute to the cause, so to speak. And if your house started on fire, well, sorry.
Yeah, although bad news is fire spreads.
It does.
So eventually it might get to the district.
Yeah, so if it's coming from your property outside the district and my property's inside the district, I'm going to pay attention.
Yeah. So the Medicine Hat Fire Department did a Fire Service did a video recently about some of that history. I think it's on the City of Medicine Hat YouTube. And it is fascinating to think about present day and how fortunate we are. And you talk about taking radio for granted. You know, we don't think about, like, we pay our taxes and we don't necessarily always appreciate, you know, how wonderful it is to have the knowledge that if there's a fire, we have people who are trained to come out and protect us and our city. It's good. I mean, if you've had a fire in your house recently, you certainly remember. But what do you think is important for not taking things for granted? How do we be grateful for what we have? What strategies can we use to really be grateful?
It's an old expression, but count your blessings.
Yeah.
You know, you probably count your blessings. They outnumber any of your troubles 10 to 1. Be thankful for what you have instead of always reaching for what you think you need.
Yeah.
Just count your blessings. And the fire service is one of them.
Yes, absolutely. We also have a very rich military history here.
Oh, yes.
We actually had one of the largest prisoner of war camps in...
Yes, where the stampede grounds are now,
Do you know much about that?
I'm working with Wes Krause, who is the fountain of knowledge.
Yes.
Again, that's another one of my projects that we're working on is military history of Medicine Hat. It goes back to into the 19th century here with the Riel Rebellion and having a regiment. I always get them mixed up. Regiment, battalion, those words don't mean
Wes
anything.
Wes will sort you out.
Oh, he will. I told him. I said, you got to help me with this. But there was people here in case something happened in 1886, something like that. There are some old pictures that allude to them camped up by Alexandra School. But when the First World War broke out, there were a lot of people here that were right there with their hands up in the air and said, yes, they formed groups and military history. We've talked about Private Pete Robertson Memorial Branch. There's a park named after him. Gave his life in the Battle of Passchendaele, which we talked with Wes about in one of our episodes. And we have a very good military tradition here, and one that I'm proud of.
Yeah, and one of the things that I learned through Wes and going through the military museum at the Pattison Armory was the role they play just in helping out.
Oh, well, and the floods, yes. Yeah. You look at 2013, particularly, they were here. They set up a field hospital up in Crescent Heights because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to cross that river because those bridges were looking like they might be in peril. So they set a field hospital up so that people could be treated in the event that we couldn't get to our regional hospital. They were in there helping people move out and sandbag and everything. You bet.
Yeah, and again, they don't have to. It's people who are volunteering to help out because help is needed, not because of the going back to media, the celebrity status, or just those people who are quietly working in the background to make our community better. I
think that is, if there's one thing that I appreciate about Medicine Hat, it's the volunteer attitude.
Yeah.
When we need to, we come together. No matter what you might think about this or that or whatever, when there's something that needs to be done, we get together and we get it done. And I think we will continue to do that.
I think you're right. To me, it's kind of like a family where, I grew up 5 siblings. We could say mean things to each other sometimes, but you don't say something mean about my sister or my brother. Yep. And I think Medicine Hat's kind of like that. We have our disagreements, but ultimately we are a community that cares about each other and wants to protect what we have and share it.
We want to tell the stories about Medicine Hat on our podcast here, and hopefully people will join us.
I think that you're gaining traction. I hear about you guys a lot. I know lots of counselors come on here, and you help us to share our story very well.
My mind was blown here the other day when Lynette Schneider, our producer, was telling me that to the end of January, our various little vehicles, because we have the long-form podcast, and then there's reels, and then there's, what do they call them now, voids, something like that. There's lots of terminology I don't get, but they can take the podcast and slice it and dice it into various different things, and it's on like Instagram and Facebook and on TikTok.
Well, look at you.
Yeah, like everywhere. Our work up to the end of January has had over 1.2 million views.
Wow.
That's in the city of Medicine Hat of 64,000 people.
That's incredible. But can you tell if people outside of the city are
Oh, yeah,
watching?
they have all the demographic. We have people who are watching us in Singapore.
Really?
You know that you are speaking Mandarin Chinese right now through the magic of YouTube. They are able to translate our work into, I think it's 23 different languages. Russian and Ukrainian and German and French.
Well, hopefully I didn't accidentally say something in Mandarin.
Yeah, I wonder about that too, but yeah.
So I have one last question for you.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking about you deciding what's news and whether you're going to do a story on something. Is there ever a story where it was so juicy and you were really amped about, oh, this is a great story, but you couldn't quite get to the point where you could write about it?
Nothing comes to mind.
Okay, so no particular scandals or...
No, I've always made a habit of when someone tries to tell me gossip, I turn it off.
Okay.
If it's not fact, I don't want to know it.
I like that. Okay, try this one on for size then. What is the strangest experience that you've had in your broadcast history? Or one that stands out as, did that really happen?
I remember sitting in on a seance once.
What?
Yeah, I used to have to do a program in Calgary when I was at CKXL Radio. And I was invited to sit in because there was this group that was sure that this house was possessed. It was an old house not too far from Sate, and they were going to have a seance. So I said, do you mind if I bring a recorder in? And
okay, I apologize. So they called the news about the...
No, they called me.
Okay.
Yeah, because they knew I did this program.
Uh-huh.
And I was open to it and went and sat, and it was interesting. I didn't really think that I felt any spectral presence.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of people who called and said, yeah, that was fun.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Did anybody say, what the heck were you doing?
Oh, no. No. They saw it for what it was. Just, hold a mirror up to something and see what's there.
Yeah. Just report.
Just report the facts, ma'am.
Yeah. Did anything ever come of that?
No.
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 Have you ever been on the ghost tour?
No.
Apparently we have a ghost tour.
Oh.
I think. I don't know if you get an actual ghost sighting out of it, but the going through historical buildings, there's always that sense of history.
I've heard that about Medelta. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's interesting, and the fact that you got real positive feedback about it is pretty cool.
Yeah.
A peek into someone else's life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, it has been a delight. Is there anything else you would like to add? I forgot to add the big scoop question at the end.
I don't think so. I think we've just about covered everything. My life has been laid bare for everyone to laugh at.
Well, you have had a very interesting life, and I disagree. I feel like we've only scratched the surface. And, I think the wisdom that you have with respect to broadcasting and its role in really guarding our democracy and ensuring that the people can contribute because they have the information to contribute. I think, if you could write a book about that.
Bob Ridley and I used to joke that we should write a book someday. And
yeah.
He would have more stories than I would because his background with the Tigers over 50 years, he told me lots of stories that are not ready for broadcast.
Right.
So
okay.
we had a good time.
Yeah, so he might have been able to answer the question, did you ever not be able to record it?
Oh, yeah. He would. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure I'll see you again, maybe on the other side of the table.
I hope so.
And thank you for agreeing to be my Sadie Hawkins.
Okay. Thank you.